The learning outcome of this video is for you to be able to describe the characteristics of social network sites. Based on a study conducted by Rice University, the University of Maryland, and Max Planck Institute for Software Systems, a successful social network site or SNS has the following characteristics: user-based, interactivity, community-driven, relationships, and emotionality. Compared to the previous version of the Internet where users rely on content creators, known as webmasters, to provide information in a unidirectional manner. SNSs are built and developed with users in mind, allowing them to populate these sites, create content, and form communities. This enables users to interact with others through conversations, messaging, sharing and exchanging content, and participating in virtual games. The result is a dynamic SNS that creates excitement for users. As for interactivity, it is not an SNS if users cannot interact with other users. Social network sites must facilitate interaction by providing features and options that allow users to manage their interactions. For example, a virtual game can be played by players from within a particular virtual community, yet also allows users from other virtual communities to participate. Moreover, while users are actively encouraged to interact, they are also given options to manage how, when, and how long they want to interact, as well as who to interact with. In other words, users can control the extent of their interaction with other users. And just like an offline community, SNSs are built on groups of people that make up a community with shared interests and goals, except that it is based on an online platform. A particular SNS or social media like Facebook is made up of thousands of these virtual communities. Users can choose to be involved in just one community, or multiple communities. For example, a user can belong to a community that shares an interest in cooking, and at the same time, be a member of an alumni community, and a wellness community. The possibilities are endless. As for relationships, social networks thrive on relationships and connections. The greater the number of connections you have, the more established you are towards the center of the network, allowing you to have a wider reach for the content you create and share, and then reshared by other users. One interesting characteristic of a SNS is the emotionality. Most of the user-generated content shared on social media touches on human emotions. Studies have shown that content with happy themes or inspirational achievements is shared faster and has a wider reach. In a world where people are constantly bombarded with unpleasant news such as disasters, economic hardship, or crime, it is a respite to see happy content on social media, inspiring people to do good for one another or overcome a difficult situation. To recap, these are the characteristics that successful social network sites or SNSs have in common. This is the end of this video. See you in the next one.